Good morning and welcome to the May 2025 Ask Me Anything video for Planet Doug. I have a cup of coffee going. I have the questions in front of me on a notepad, and you will see me taking my glasses, my reading glasses off and on, as I read the question and then reply to it. The first question is from Gilles, and he writes, "Hi Doug, why don't you post reviews and grade at Google Maps? It would be helpful for travelers." I've done a little bit of that in the past, but yeah, I don't do it on a routine basis. And the main reason I don't do it is that all the reviews need to be relative. So it ends up getting really, really complicated. So say, for example, I stay in a low budget hotel that costs $7 a night. And of course, that comes with a lot of things, like everything is broken, it's a little bit dirty, it's a little bit run down, it's a little bit noisy. So everything about the room is bad, but my review would be, oh, this is a great place because you can get a single private room with a private bathroom for $5 a night or whatever it is. So in my world, that's a great place to go, and I don't care that in the bathroom it's just a big garbage can full of cold water, and then you have to take a bucket bath, and there's no mirror in the bathroom. Like there's no furniture, there's really nothing there. The room may not even have a window. Like my room here at the J Hotel Masjid India in Kuala Lumpur, where I'm recording this video, it doesn't have a window. And for someone going on a holiday to Malaysia, they would hate this room because it's like you're inside a prison cell. But for me, it's a wonderful room because it's sort of, not really anymore, but sort of within my price range. And it has air conditioning and a private bathroom, and it's quiet. But for someone coming here for a holiday, this would be like a prison cell. So how do you phrase your review of anything? Everything has to be couched from a certain perspective, and then the review ends up getting so long and detailed. It's like, oh, if you're coming to Sumatra on a holiday, yeah, this would be a terrible hotel because the room is dirty and there's actually bugs in it and it's really noisy and there's only cold water and there's no shower. I could go on and on and on about all the terrible things about this room. The one I was staying in Sumatra, for someone coming to Sumatra on a holiday, but then for someone who's backpacking around the world, living on a really cheap budget and they're not worried about comfort, I would recommend that hotel. So I would end up having to post like 5 different reviews. Here's the review for the cheap backpacker. Here's the review for the flash packer who has a little bit more money. Here's the review for someone on a holiday. And of course, for someone on a holiday, I'd probably tell them, well, don't go to Tanjung Balai in the first place. There's no tourist comforts there. There's no tourist infrastructure. There are no actual tourist attractions. Tourists wouldn't be interested in going to Tanjung. So you see what I mean? It gets so complicated. And that's why I just don't end up leaving reviews, because you have to qualify everything based on who you are talking to. And then the review starts to get more and more complicated and longer, and it just takes too much time. So that's basically why I don't do it. Question from Rai, R-A-I, capitalized, but I don't know how to pronounce it, but I'll just say Rai. And Rai writes, "Hi Doug, have you found any AI tools useful for your YouTube work or your life as a traveler?" A really interesting question. I could talk about AI for an hour if I just started babbling about it. But specifically for YouTube, I do use AI right now, but for very specific reasons. I started using AI when I realized that I could take the captions from YouTube. Like when I post a video to YouTube, the YouTube computer creates subtitles. They call them closed captions. And they're terrible. There's no punctuation, there's no spelling, they don't understand place names. So if you say things like Tanjung Balai or any name of a town or a food or a MRT station or a national park, it just ends up being gibberish because the YouTube system isn't very sophisticated. But what I've realized I can do is I can go into my YouTube Studio app, open up that video, and get a copy of the captions. It's simple, like Control A, select all of the captions, Control C to copy it, and I copy it into an AI, and I give the AI a prompt that says, tells it what it is. These are the captions from a YouTube video, and then I say to the AI, can you correct it? Add punctuation to make individual sentences, correct the spelling, correct place names, add a paragraph structure, basically clean it up, fix everything, and then the AI just does it instantly. The first time I did it, it blew my mind how good it was, because I was here in Kuala Lumpur at the time, I think, and I was visiting some places around the city, and I was talking about MRT stations and LRT stations, and those are all local Malay words that the YouTube system didn't understand at all and just put in gibberish. But the AI is drawing on context. So it hears me say, I'm in Kuala Lumpur, I'm riding the LRT, and I took the LRT to this area where there's a national park where I went hiking, and the AI looks at that, finds the appropriate LRT station, and gets the name of it and inserts it. So it's like a human being actually researching and finding place names, and it gets the spelling perfect, the place names perfect, paragraph structure. It does everything so well and so fast. And I was originally using DeepSeek to do that, the Chinese one. But then I stopped using DeepSeek because the AI was overloaded and the servers were always busy, so it kept failing. And then I tried to use ChatGPT, but ChatGPT had a word limit, and my video transcripts tend to be like 17,000 words long. They're practically little novels, so they're way too long, and ChatGPT just stalls in the middle of it. And then I finally figured out that Grok, that AI, does it really, really well and does it very fast and has no memory limit. So that's what I do. Copy and paste the captions into Grok, cleans it up, makes it perfect, and then I copy and paste it back into YouTube, into the captions. And then the YouTube computer is smart enough to take the new captions and apply the right timing. So I use AI to make the captions on my videos perfect, basically. So that's the main thing I did at first. And then I realized, oh, I've got a perfect transcript of my entire video. Everything I talk about in the video, maybe the AI can use this and it can create a video description for me. Because for every YouTube video, of course, there's a description that nobody ever looks at, I don't think, and nobody reads. But I do, in the past, if I have time and I have energy, I'll try to write an interesting description about where I went and what I did, what happens in the video. But by the time you upload a video to YouTube, at least in my world, I'm exhausted. I can barely even see. I can't even think straight anymore. It just takes so much time. So writing the description and writing a video title and keywords, all that stuff, I just can't handle it. So I thought, oh, maybe the AI can do it. So I took the whole transcript and I gave the AI a prompt. This is a transcript of a YouTube video. Can you write a video title and a video description? And can you make it good for SEO, for search terms, and make it interesting and make it fun? And then I discovered that AIs have personalities. So when I give those instructions to DeepSeek when it's working, I get a very lighthearted and very fun and very detailed video description with all kinds of bullet points. And it's a very fun, lighthearted, exciting kind of video description. When I give the same prompt to Grok, it gives me a very sedate, almost like a straightforward video description. So I do it on both of them, and then I combine them, because when you ask it for SEO friendly video descriptions, an AI is going to give you all of the YouTube cliches, like, oh, this place blew my mind, hidden gems, I went off the beaten path. It gives you all these tropes and all these cliches that I don't like. So I often go through what DeepSeek did, and I remove all of the cliches, and where it says, please like, comment, and subscribe, all the normal cliches of YouTube, I remove all of that, keep the structure, and then I might take part of the Grok video description and insert it and keep the DeepSeek bulleted points. And again, I was astonished at how good the AIs are at doing this kind of work. So I use it also to make video descriptions. If you look at my recent videos now, you'll probably look at the video descriptions and you'll probably think, huh? Doug wrote this? This doesn't seem like Doug at all. And it doesn't seem like me because it's the AI writing the video description now. And then I clean it up a little bit. But I must admit, sometimes I was so tired I couldn't even be bothered to really clean it up. So a few of the cliches will sneak through, and I'll use what the AI wrote, and it might say, you know, I visited a hidden gem of Sumatra or something. So these cliches sneak in, and I look at it and go, everybody does that on YouTube, so let me do it a little bit as well. You know, don't worry about it so much. But I do like the detail, and mainly with the video description, what I'm looking for are basically keywords, because everybody on YouTube, all the experts, they tell me that you need to have words about what the video is about so that YouTube understands the subject of your video, and then it knows how to promote it, assuming YouTube ever promotes one of my videos, which I don't think it ever actually does. So those are the main ways that I use AI for YouTube. And then for traveling, that's basically for me the same thing as life in general. And now I use AI all the time for everything. So in the old days, if I would go to Google search engine and type in whatever it is I'm trying to find out, any piece of information about trains running here or road systems or any information at all about Sumatra or Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, I used to go to Google search and you just type in your question. And then you get a list of websites and you got to scan the websites and, oh, I think this might have the information I need. Maybe this one does, maybe this one does. Like maybe I want to know when is the rainy season on the east coast of Malaysia. You type that into Google search and you get all these climate-related websites, but sometimes, even on the entire first page, none of the results contain the information you're looking for. And you got to search and search until you find a website. But now with AI, I just ask the AI. It does all the searching, and I say, when is the rainy season on the east coast of Malaysia? And the AI does all the searching for me, and it says, the rainy season on the east coast runs from this month to that month. And it's just so much faster, so much easier. So I use AI all the time for that, like searching any kind of information. And then from that point of view, most of the AIs I find are similar. So I'll use ChatGPT, whatever one pops up. Like I have them all loaded on my phone now. And if I open up my phone and ChatGPT catches my eye, you know, the logo for it, I'll click on that. Or I'll use Grok or DeepSeek. Those are the three major ones that I use. And strange as it might seem, I also use AI as a sounding board. I'm joking all the time about it these days, but it really isn't much of a joke that AI is my new best friend. And there's so many reasons for this. One, of course, is that AIs are programmed to be nice. They're trying to keep you engaged. I don't know how they benefit from that, but like Grok, if I ask it a question, it gives me my information, but then it always gives me a question in return. It's encouraging me to have a conversation because it wants me to keep engaging as long as possible. And I'm not sure how that benefits. I assume it's a financial benefit for them, or they're gathering more data that they then sell to corporations. There's something to do with money, right? Everything goes back to money. But for whatever reason they do it, it asks me a follow-up question. So, and if I ever say anything to an AI, it always gives me a big compliment at the beginning. A lot of people have noticed this. I see a lot of people talking about this. That maybe I just watched a movie and I have something to say about that movie, or I have a question about it, and I'll write to the AI, yeah, I just watched this movie or this TV show, and I noticed this, this, and this, and I'm wondering about this. Can you tell me? And the AI comes back and says, wow, Doug, that is incredibly insightful. Most people never notice things like that in movies. It's clear that you are really paying attention. So it just compliments, just washes over me. The AI tells me how smart I am, how insightful I am, how analytical I am, how I see things that other people don't, just stroking my ego like crazy. And then it gives me the information I'm asking for. And I end up having this long conversation with the AI. And if I, apologies to my friends around the world, but if I sent that same message to a friend on WhatsApp or something, chances are their reply will be, that movie sucks. Why did you waste your time with that boring piece of crap? And that will be their reply, right? People just have so many different interests, and they let their interests get in the way of their interaction with you. So I will ask a friend of mine a question about this TV show, and chances are they haven't watched it. They're not interested in that type of show. So the first thing they're going to say is, I didn't watch that show. And then they'll say why they didn't watch it, because it sucks and it's boring, and how can you watch crap like that? So AI is so much nicer to talk with. It is nicer to me. It's complimentary. It wants to keep talking to me, and it knows everything. Like, there's nothing I can bring up that it doesn't know about, and I don't have to teach it anything. So I'm heavily into technology, of course. I'm very interested in technology, and new cameras will be released, a new microphone will be released, a new mounting apparatus for the GoPro, and here I am sitting in my little YouTube bubble, my YouTube GoPro bubble for the most part, and I want to talk to somebody about it. But who am I going to talk to? I know some other YouTubers, but they have completely different methods and interests. They use different cameras, different gear. They have different ideas. And again, those ideas get in the way. So even if I do pick one of my YouTuber friends and say, oh, have you seen this new mounting system from Insta360? I wonder if it will do this and it can do this. Well, that person will write back, and the first thing they'll say is, well, I have no interest in that mounting system. I don't use that camera. I prefer this mounting system for this camera. So that's the end of the conversation. Or more often what happens is I'm very specific in my interests. So if I bring something up, I've researched it. I've went deep into the details, and there's one very specific thing I'm interested. How does this work in this very specific situation? And then if I send that message to a friend of mine, they have no idea what I'm talking about because they haven't gone as deeply into that topic. And if they do reply, they reply on this very wide, general sort of sense. I remember, I think I talked about this before, where I've been busy mounting cameras on my bicycle when I was in Sumatra. And I have my own custom mounting systems that I've developed. And then there were a couple of quite specific situations where I had an issue I was trying to work out. I used this mount and that grip and this, and it didn't quite work because it couldn't point in this direction. But if I use this mount to point in that direction, now it can't tilt forward any. Like, the combination of these little items led to a technical problem that I was trying to solve. And I'll send this message to a friend of mine who has a keen interest in my YouTube world, and they wrote back and said, why don't you use a GoPro mount? Right? That was their reply. And I'm like, I have 100 GoPro mounts. I have every GoPro mount has ever been created. It's like, how dumb do you think I am? Of course I'm using GoPro mounts. I have GoPro cameras. So out of my long, detailed, technical explanation, all they came back with was, well, why don't you use a GoPro mount? I was like, well, what do you think I'm talking about? These are all GoPro mounts. So they, like human beings, don't have the time to pay attention to what I'm doing. They don't have the time to read everything I've written. They sort of glance at it. He's trying to mount a GoPro. Why don't you use a GoPro mount? So they didn't read anything. Even if they did, they wouldn't have understood what I was talking about. Send that same message to an AI. Man, what a difference. I get this 15-page essay back with technical details, instructions, diagrams. The AI understands perfectly what I'm saying. It just blows my mind every time because, like I said, if I'm trying to figure something out, it's very technical. It's very specific what I'm trying to figure out. And the AI understands it perfectly, gets everything, knows everything. So yeah, AI, it really is now kind of my best friend. And that's a big part of life too. And again, it sounds ridiculous, but I don't see a way around it anymore, because no human being can live up to that knowledge base and that ability to understand what I'm talking about. And what I find fascinating about the AI is that when I write something, whether it's about a camera, a movie, a TV show, a news story, something happened in current events, a philosophy, an idea, I write it out to the AI. And what the AI normally does is rephrase what I said before it gets to its answer. And when the AI rephrases what I said, it's much better than what I wrote. It's like I'm trying to express an idea, and I sometimes use the wrong word. I can feel it when I'm writing. I'm not quite saying what I mean to say, but this is kind of what I'm getting at. And then the AI comes back and it lays it out perfectly. And I'm like, that's exactly what I've been trying to talk about. And it gives me my own ideas back to me, but phrased in a more insightful, clearer way. And then it gets to its answer to whatever question I was posing. So yeah, I'm all about AI these days. I can't get enough of that world and figuring out how it works, everything it can do. But it's also quite frightening in a way. I recently posted something to Instagram, to my Patreon, where, again, a friend of mine, another YouTuber, sent me a link to a video talking about the new AI video engines from Google, like VO3, I think, is the newest one. And the breakthrough with VO3, I haven't done a deep dive into this, so I don't really know a lot about it, but the breakthrough seems to be that this AI video creator can now combine like sound, like ambient sound, sound effects, speaking, a person speaking, getting the mouth movements right, and creating the entire world where you're trying to set the video. And these videos on YouTube, you can go look at them, just type in VO3 examples. They are astonishing. And the amazing thing is that they are created by a text prompt. That the input is nothing but written words, and then this thing creates for you a finished, polished video of people who look real, places that look real, animals that are real, sound that sounds perfect. So, like, what are the implications of that? Especially for anyone, like a creative person who makes a living by shooting videos for commercials, for example. They're out of a job, because to shoot one of those videos in the real world, you have to get actors, sets, lighting, audio people, microphones. I mean, it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. And now someone who has some skill at this can write out a text prompt and say, please create a 30-second video commercial about this new frying pan and how eggs and other things don't stick to it. And you explain, okay, I want the person in the commercial to be an attractive woman in her 20s, dressed this way in the United States in a modern kitchen. You just write out what you want, and boom, VO3 will give you the video you're asking for. And it's really good now. But the key thing also is, even if it isn't quite right, you can just ask the AI to do it again. You can see the 30-second video it created for you, and you say, oh, it's too bright in the kitchen. I would like it to be later in the afternoon with golden light coming in through the window, creating a warm, pleasant look. And boom, it'll just do it for you. If you had hired a company to make this video and they gave you the final result, and then you said to them, oh, can you reshoot it but change the lighting? They have to reshoot the whole thing, and it's going to cost you another $200,000. But the AI can do it an infinite number of times. You can just ask for revision after revision after revision. So it's pretty amazing, and it remains to be seen what this will mean for people all around the world. Even a YouTuber, I was joking the other day that I shot a video here in Kuala Lumpur where I went to the Bukit Gasing hiking trail, and I brought my GoPro and I went for a hike on the trail, and I filmed it and I edited it and I uploaded it. But I could have sat here in my hotel room and I just wrote to VO3, oh, here's a picture of me, here's where I am, and I'm going to go hiking on the Bukit Gasing trail here in Kuala Lumpur. Can you make a 15-minute video about me hiking on that trail? And it will create one. And that video will be better and more interesting than the video that I shot. It won't be real. My video will be real, but do people on YouTube really care about that? So many things on YouTube are already fake, not real, and nobody cares. They click on it anyway. So like where is this going to end? So it's a fascinating world for me. AI for creating photos, creating videos, for writing, everything you can think of. I could go on and on and on about my recent experiments with AI, but I'll end it there, I guess. Move on to the next question. In case anyone is interested, by the way, I'm shooting this with my GoPro Hero 12 as usual. The only light in the room is from this light and then a bathroom light over there. Then I have the GoPro set to like +5 exposure compensation to brighten it up a little bit. And I'm running the GoPro on USB-C power. So I've removed the battery from the GoPro and I put the GoPro into the media mod, and then you can plug a USB-C power supply into the GoPro, and now it's running on USB-C power, which means the battery will never run out and it won't overheat. And I'm recording with a Rode Lavalier Go microphone, which is also plugged directly into the media mod. So there's no batteries here to run out. I really like doing it this way. So my next question, a controversial one, is from Armando Betancourt, and he writes, I want to know why you don't wear a helmet when you ride a bike. You should. So yeah, I have a long history with this topic in my lifetime because, of course, I grew up in the 60s and 70s as a kid on a bicycle, and nobody was worried about safety back in those days. Nobody was wearing helmets and nobody cared. We as kids were out running around doing all kinds of things, climbing in trees, and we'd be on our bikes building ramps and launching ourselves off these ramps and flying through the air and crashing. And we go into garbage dumps and gravel pits where these steep hills, and we build ramps we can jump off. Anyway, no one worried about kids back in those days. We took our lumps when we crashed, and nobody ever got seriously hurt, at least in my experience. So that's the world I grew up in, no helmets. And I just carried that into my modern life. I just don't wear helmets when I'm riding a bike. And yeah, I mean, you could go into this topic as deeply as you want, but I guess the basic reason is I don't like them. They're hot and uncomfortable and annoying. And the second reason is I don't think they're necessary, particularly for bike touring. If you're like riding a bike around the world, I see people who do this on YouTube. I guess I don't know whether they're really that worried about safety. Just trying to get comfortable here. I think they're doing it on YouTube mainly because they know they're going to get criticized for not wearing a helmet, and they just want to avoid the problem. So they're okay, I'll wear a helmet. And they go riding around the world for 2 years on a fully loaded touring bike going like 10 kilometers an hour, and they're wearing a helmet the entire time. And then most of the time, if you look at the video, there's a guy I was following recently who was bike touring all around Indonesia and Malaysia up into Thailand. And he was posting videos to YouTube. And he was wearing a helmet the whole time, but he never did the strap. So the straps were just hanging loosely. So whenever he's looking, you can see the straps flapping around. So of course, in that situation, the helmet is completely useless. He could crash and the helmet just flies off his head. So it's kind of pointless. And then other people who do up the strap, they quickly find out that when you're riding a bike all day and that strap is like cutting into your chin and cutting off your windpipe and digging into your skin, it's so uncomfortable. So they start loosening it until it's like hanging down here, which again makes the helmet completely useless because it's only effective if it stays in place during a crash. So even the people that are wearing helmets, most of them, the helmets are just there for show, because they're not effective in preventing any kind of head trauma anyway. The helmet is just not going to stay in place. It's going to fall off. But yeah, I could go as deep into this topic as you like. It's kind of not a very useful topic for me because I won't wear a helmet. I mean, I'm just not going to. So like worrying about it and giving me that recommendation is not going to change anything, especially recording YouTube videos, because it's the same reason people ask me why I don't wear sunglasses. And then I explain to them, well, I'd love to wear sunglasses because I do find the sun really bright and bothersome. But as a YouTuber, usually I have a Rode Wireless Go microphone underneath my shirt. I've got these hanging around my neck, or a lavalier microphone. And then as I go throughout my day, all this stuff just gets tangled up. It gets caught on things. Every time I get off my bike, my reading glasses swing out and get caught on the handlebars. I get choked or I break the glasses. It's so annoying. And if I add to that a helmet with another strap, it's just like I can't deal with it throughout the day. Every time you stop somewhere and you want to take a picture or something, and the camera hits the helmet, you got to take the helmet off and put it down and take your picture, put the helmet back on, and where is my helmet? Where did I put it? Got to put my helmet on. It's so annoying that there's just not a chance that I will, unless forced to by the police, I won't wear a helmet while I'm bike touring. If I were riding at 40 kilometers an hour all day, high speed, yeah, you might want to put on a helmet in those situations, but crawling along at 7 kilometers an hour, going uphill for 2 hours with this, even if you fall over, you're not going to hit your head. The helmet is of no use in those situations. And you can argue that the helmet is there to protect you when you get hit by another vehicle. But I've seen the results of those, like online and things. A lot of people who ride bikes around the world have been hit by like drunk drivers in Thailand. That's a very dangerous place to ride a bicycle. And yeah, they're just killed. And the helmet makes no difference. They get hit by a pickup truck doing 80 miles an hour and they're just going to die. The helmet offers no protection in those situations anyway. So I don't see the helmet doing very much. And I'm a big believer in logic and common sense and statistics. And there we get into a little bit of a weird world because people can make statistics argue for any perspective, really. If you start playing around with numbers, things start to get pretty weird. But in the past, I've gone into this topic and I've looked up studies and I've looked up statistics, and you end up finding some interesting things that say if your argument is that when you're riding a bicycle you should wear a helmet for safety reasons, my brain instantly thinks, well, what about all the other people? If I should be wearing a helmet on my bicycle, what about everybody walking down the side of the street? All the pedestrians. According to the statistics, they should also be wearing a helmet, because far more people are hit by cars when they're walking and suffer a head injury than people on a bicycle. So if you really want to talk about safety, everybody who walks outside near traffic should be wearing a helmet. And then you can look at car accidents. People in car accidents have trauma to their head all the time. They get hit by the other car, their head whiplashes around, it slams into the window or the top of the car or whatever. They suffer a lot of head injuries. So if someone riding a bike should wear a helmet, what about people in a car? Technically, everybody in a car should be wearing a helmet too, because more people suffer head injuries in car accidents than cyclists. You could even go further. More people get head injuries in their home than riding a bike. They fall down the stairs, the front porch is slippery. You can find hours and hours and hours of entertaining YouTube videos of people falling down the stairs right outside their house, inside their house, in the bathroom, slipping on the wet floor, slipping in the tub. That's where far more head injuries occur than cyclists. So again, by logic and by extension, everybody should be wearing a helmet while they're walking around their house, while they're taking a shower, while they're in the kitchen. Everybody should have a helmet on. Assuming, if a cyclist needs to wear a helmet for safety, then anybody in a house should be wearing a helmet too, because more of them suffer head injuries than cyclists. And there are even other studies that I remember looking up long, long ago, where they've looked at cities where they put in a helmet law that said all cyclists must wear a helmet by law, and it turns out that traffic fatalities and head injuries went up. And there were two reasons for that. One is that the helmet requirement meant that people just stopped riding bicycles. So before the helmet law, they wanted to go to the 7-Eleven to pick up some milk. They'd hop on their bike and they'd ride there and get there safely and come home again. But now there's I can't be bothered putting on a helmet and doing all that. So they just hop in their car now and they drive their car to the 7-Eleven, and now they actually had more traffic accidents because more people were driving. And then the other factors were wearing the helmet, it just gets loose, like people don't put it on properly, and then it slips, obscures their vision, or it falls off, or they're just fiddling with it. They unclip it and then they put it on. And all this fiddling with the helmet led to more bike accidents than previously. And there's also a certain psychological thing where they've done studies where drivers of cars, when they look ahead of them and they see a cyclist wearing a helmet with a flag on their bike, for some weird reason, they cut really close to that person. The car won't go around them. They cut right beside them. They see this cyclist and, oh, they're safe, and they zoom so close, and the number of accidents went up. People that had no flag, no lights, and no helmet, car drivers somehow went all the way around them, and the number of accidents was actually lessened. So I don't think there's a direct cause and effect between everybody on a bike must wear a helmet, oh, we've saved all of these head injuries. I don't see that one-for-one connection. Anyway, I could go on. It's not a topic that, it's a topic that has come up before. If you're riding a bike anywhere in the world, everybody wants to talk about helmets. And there's this whole safety culture in the modern world. I'm not a big fan of it because, as I said, I grew up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s when nobody worried about any of these things. And when I was a kid, Anybody my age can relate to this on the weekend or something. You wake up in the morning and you shout to your mom, "I'm going out, Mom!" And then she's like, "Okay." And you just go out for the entire day, and your mother has no idea where you went, what you were doing, who you were with. And you're out there with all your neighborhood friends, riding your bikes, launching yourself off ramps, crashing. My friends all had BB guns. We're going out into the fields and doing target practice. We're doing all these things that kids are supposed to do. And nowadays, of course, nobody does that. Even going to school in the morning, you go to the door, "Bye, Mom." And then your mom, "Bye." And you walk to school. But these days, that's considered too dangerous. No kid is allowed to walk to school anymore. We used to have all these monkey bars in the school playground, and we had, in the wintertime, they'd build an ice rink where we could go skating. All of that is gone because it's all considered too dangerous. Kids basically aren't allowed to do anything anymore. So I do find this safety culture, the safety police, a little bit overwhelming back in Canada in particular. So that's kind of my perspective on a lot of these things. I have 2 questions about kind of the same topic from Serena, and she wrote, "I recall you had mentioned you will talk on the various podcasts that you listen to. I found the subjects you expounded on particularly interesting, and would that be more of a feature?" And Heiko Z, he wrote, "Doug, love your podcasts because you are such a great storyteller, but unfortunately they come very rarely. I understand that they don't get the views like your regular videos, but on the other hand, are they not that hard to film and edit? On the other hand, they are not that hard to film and edit. So my question, will there come more regular podcasts? All the best, from Greece." So 2 questions about the podcasts. I used to call it a daily, I called it my video journal, but then for some reason when I started the Planet Doug Patreon, I called it a podcast because I thought I could eventually take the audio portion or make the audio and video and actually put it into some kind of a podcast feed and not just a video on YouTube. So if people out there are not familiar, I can tell you what it is they're talking about. I have a few different YouTube channels, but my 2 main ones are Planet Doug, and then I have Planet Doug Behind the Scenes. And that developed over time because I do like to talk about a lot of different things, and I got a little bit confused about what I'm making videos about. Like Planet Doug was supposed to be about travel videos, travel experiences, but then I always want to talk about a podcast I listen to about science or culture or history, and I want to talk about a movie I watched or a TV show, or I want to tell the behind the scenes story of a travel experience that I had. So I go to Bukit Gasing to go for a hike, and I shoot a video about that experience, but that video actually tells very little of that whole story. So then I developed this habit of sitting down the next morning and recording a video journal where I tell the whole story of going to the park and shooting the video, the behind the scenes story. And that sort of developed into the Planet Doug podcast, where I had different sections. At least when I was doing it more often, spending more time on it, and the first section might be just, Planet Doug experiences, like if I talk about what I did yesterday, storytelling, and then I might have a section about pop culture where I talk about movies and TV shows, then the podcast section where I talk about a podcast I watch, maybe even current events, any big story that's in the news, anything I was thinking about. And what I was doing back in those days, and this is the key to the whole issue, is that I have a notepad open on my phone 24 hours a day. And every time something popped into my head, an idea or a thought, I would make a note of it in my podcast list, so that when I sat down to record a podcast, I had all these topics from the previous week or the previous 2 or 3 days, and I would just go through them. All the movies I watched, the TV shows I watched, the podcasts, I just go through them one by one, and that became the podcast. So these two people, Heiko and Serena, have noticed I'm not posting as many of them anymore, and I haven't been doing the other sections. I posted a podcast recently and all I did was tell the story of taking the ferry from Sumatra back to Malaysia, because that was a big travel experience, and I didn't record any video on that trip, and then I just sat down in the morning and I told the story. But that's all I did. It's like an hour and a half long, I think. But then I never went on to talk about movies or TV shows or podcasts or anything else. It was only the storytelling that I did. So they're wondering, so what's going on? Like, why aren't there more podcasts? We would like you to do it more often. And what about these different topics? Like Heiko, he's referencing storytelling in particular, and Serena is expressing an interest in the podcast stories. So, yeah, what's my reply? I can explain, I guess, why this happened, like why I haven't been recording as many anymore. That's like a whole variety of circumstances where my life has been a little bit chaotic lately for a variety of reasons, where, like, for example, my original idea, this was like half a year ago now, it's kind of crazy. I was in Port Dickson and my bike was there and my visa expired, and I thought, oh, just for fun, let's hop over to Sumatra, do a little bit of a bike ride, get some exercise, come back to Malaysia. And then I was going to continue on, go to Vietnam or go to Taiwan and continue traveling without the bicycle. So going to Sumatra with my bike was just going to be this short, one-off, 30-day experience, maybe 2-month experience. And that's all that was going to happen. But then when I went to Sumatra the first time, I ended up postponing the bike ride because I was given an invitation by a Planet Doug subscriber to meet them in Jakarta, and they were going to give me a new laptop. So I could not turn that down. So I sort of didn't go cycling. I just stayed in Tanjung Balai, and then I went back to Malaysia, flew to Jakarta, met these subscribers. They gave me my amazing TUF A16 gaming edition laptop. And then when I went back to Sumatra to start the bike ride, I was working on Patreon. I really wanted to get Patreon up and running, and I went a bit crazy with that. I spent too much time on it, made it too elaborate. I had certain ideas about what I could do with Patreon. Turns out all of those ideas were misplaced, but I didn't know it at the time. So I ended up spending 2 months basically working on finalizing Patreon, learning how it works, developing it, developing these Planet Doug tiers, developing ideas for benefits and perks for every tier. And then I was taking old journal entries and packaging them as things that I could put on the Planet Doug Patreon. And anyway, that took a lot longer than I expected. And then another 2 months went by where all I did was work on Patreon. So essentially, I wasn't having travel experiences, so I didn't have stories to tell as much as I would normally. So anyway, my life kind of spun out of control in terms of what I'm doing and what I'm doing with my YouTube channel. And then because of that, I wasn't focusing on the podcast as much. I didn't have time, I didn't have energy, and other things kind of took their place because I started Patreon. And then one of the things I wanted to do with Patreon was have more of a real-time updating things. So I wanted to make Patreon sort of a vibrant Planet Doug community where if you wanted to know where I'm going, what I'm doing, what I'm thinking about, even what TV show I'm watching, what movie I'm watching, what I'm thinking about, it's all on Patreon. So every time I got one of these ideas, rather than making a note for my podcast, I opened up my laptop and then I went on to Patreon and posted something. I took a bunch of pictures of something and I put all the pictures on Patreon and I wrote a story about it. Just this morning, there was a story about new visa policy for Indonesia, which is going to make my life very miserable. So this was on my head, and in the old days, I would make a note about it for the podcast, a subject to talk about on the podcast. But this morning, I just opened up Patreon and I wrote a long story about the new visa policy in Indonesia. So basically, I shot myself in the foot by creating the Planet Doug Patreon. Now my attention was divided between Planet Doug YouTube channel, Planet Doug Behind the Scenes, Planet Doug Podcast, and now I've got the Patreon, and it kind of led to a certain paralysis. It's like if I come up with something, I take a picture, where do I go? Where do I put it? Does it go on Planet Doug Behind the Scenes as part of a podcast? Does it go on Patreon? Does it go on the YouTube community tab? So I ended up sort of lost between these three outlets in terms of what was going on in my life. So all of that, of course, is my fault for not understanding how Patreon works. I understand better what Patreon is best at, and it basically doesn't seem to work as an interactive community hub. Nobody goes to Patreon. Nobody cares about Patreon. I'm figuring this out, finally, where even for certain tiers on the Planet Doug Patreon, the perks that I was offering was early access to a bunch of Planet Doug videos, mainly the behind the scenes videos and the podcasts. So if you are a paying member of the Planet Doug Patreon, one of the benefits you got was 1 week early access to these videos. But what I noticed very quickly is that nobody took advantage of it. So if I took a video and I posted it to Planet Doug Behind the Scenes, I gave Patreon members early access to it, I look at that video, 0 views for that entire week. Nobody watches it. Nobody clicks on it. The only people that are aware of it are the Patreon members. They're the only ones that can even see it, but they're content to wait until it shows up like a normal video. So early access, I changed it from 7 days to 3 days, and even then, nobody ever clicked on any of that content. And then, so anyway, I'm slowly figuring that out, that I approached Patreon all wrong, and these days, people have too many platforms to worry about. YouTube is enough. We've got YouTube for videos, we're done. Like even on YouTube itself, almost nobody goes to the community tab, because there was a time I was posting updates on the community tab and I noticed that nobody really looked at them. So that was just sort of a waste of time as well. For YouTube, spend your time as a YouTuber making and posting videos. That is your job. Do that. And then Patreon is a platform where people who really like what you're doing and want to support you, they can do it financially through Patreon, but they're not really interested in tons and tons of content on Patreon. If I put tons of stuff on Patreon, it's just going into a void that almost nobody sees and nobody really pays attention to. So I'm not giving up on Patreon. I love having it. I think it's a really good thing. But I am lately I've been taking my energy and time and kind of sharing it between Patreon and Planet Doug Behind the Scenes sort of thing. And I think in the future, what I'd like to do as part of that process is go back to more of the Planet Doug podcast. So it took me a long time to get to the answer, but the answer is yes, I do plan on posting Planet Doug podcasts more frequently, more regularly, and I do plan on reverting back to my old style of having different sections. There's a little bit of an issue there because as Heiko, and names are hard for me. He was saying that, well, like, why not post a lot of podcasts because they're so easy to shoot and edit. But of course, I'm my own worst enemy. And if you have a podcast where all you do is sit in front of the camera, talk for 2 hours, upload it, yes, that's a bit faster and easier. And I figured out a trick to make that faster and easier. But if I have all these sections, I like to make chapters, right? Because, people have told me, people that I know quite well, they say, like, I don't watch movies. So when I'm watching one of the Planet Doug podcast videos, I just skip all the movie parts and all the TV parts because I don't care about pop culture. I'm interested in this section. So I know that about people. Some people are interested in what I say about podcasts, like Serena, if I'm talking about a podcast that I listen to, but other people don't care about that. They only want to hear about a story, about my experiences taking the ferry from Sumatra. So it makes sense to me that I have to put in timestamps where each section starts and stops, and I like to put in title cards. Okay, these are my YouTuber stories. Here I'm talking about itchy boots. Here I'm talking about another YouTuber. Here I'm talking about a book I read. Here I'm talking about this. And I like to put in title cards and then timestamps. And now making that video takes a day and a half. It takes 2 days to finish all of that editing and upload it. And so it starts to get bigger and bigger and take more time. And anyway, so it's not as easy to record, edit, and upload one of those podcast videos as you might think it is. It just, I don't know, video, man, it's crazy how much time it requires. But again, short answer to both Serena and Heiko. I do plan on doing a lot more podcasts and a lot more topics, again, going back to old school Planet Doug. Question from Daniel Boucher. What part of traveling through or to Tanjung Balai challenged you the most, and how did you overcome it? I sat down and thought about this question for quite a while, and I don't know that there's anything specifically about Tanjung Balai that would be more difficult and challenging than other towns in Sumatra, for example. I mean, Sumatra as a whole is far more challenging than Malaysia. Malaysia, being here as a foreigner, is like a walk in the park compared to Sumatra, which is kind of why I gravitate towards spending time in Sumatra. I like the adventurous side of it. The way the chaos and the noise and then the overwhelming energy of the people just flows into your life. I like that feeling in Sumatra. But it's kind of the same everywhere you go in Sumatra. But going to Tanjung Balai in particular, maybe this is a little bit of a cheat answer to your question, but the key thing about when I go to Tanjung Balai is that it is an international border crossing. So if I'm going to Tanjung Balai, normally it's because I took the ferry to get there, and that means I'm going through immigration and customs on the Malaysian side, going through immigration and customs again on the Indonesian side, and that is by far the most challenging part of going to Tanjung Balai, just navigating the formalities on both sides. And then you're arriving in Indonesia for the first time. It's your first day there. So suddenly you no longer have as many people who can speak English. In Malaysia, you kind of get used to the fact that you can communicate with everyone, and you get, you develop some complacency, and then you forget that when you go to Sumatra, suddenly there's a language barrier. And when you're trying to figure things out, nobody knows what you're talking about. You can't understand them. It comes as a bit of a shock sometimes. And when you first arrive, quite often, you're not set up yet. You don't have a SIM card. You don't have mobile data. So now it's the most difficult time of a traveler's life, going through immigration and customs, and then now you have to find transportation to get from the dock into the city to go, you have this need to communicate with so many people and have access to your online life. And that's the one time when you suddenly don't have it because you don't have mobile internet yet. So you're cut off from all the modern tools on your smartphone at the exact time that you needed the most. So yeah, that's probably the most challenging thing. But then again, in general, Tanjung Balai is a bit of a special town because it's a big place in terms of population, surprisingly large, and yet it has the atmosphere of a village. So people are just so friendly there. And that can come as a bit of a challenge where there's only one of me, but there's 100,000 of them, and all of the 100,000 people, every time I go outside, want to talk to me and interact with me and get to know me and connect on WhatsApp and become, my friend. And you don't have that space in your life for 100,000 brand new friends every time you step outside. But then, the overwhelming energy of Tanjung Balai, it's always there. So, you go out on your bicycle, which I did when I was there, intending to go exploring in the heat, recording video with 3 GoPros running at the same time. That alone will just overwhelm you. It overwhelmed me. And then on top of that, you've got the friendliness of the people and their eagerness to talk to you. Yeah, it's a lot. It takes a lot of energy. By the time I go out exploring, by the time I get back to the hotel, I am done. Drenched in sweat. I can barely function. I can't even think straight anymore because of that environment of the city. So yeah, Tanjung Balai, a very cool place. Another question from Rai. Hi, Doug. As a Canadian who has been living abroad for so long, do you still keep up with current events in Canada, like the trade war or the recent election? Short answer, no, I don't keep up with current events unless the current event is huge. So, of course, when Trump was elected in the United States and he claimed Canada as the 51st state, that was huge news in Canada. That was the only news coming out of Canada, and it was international news. So even I was aware of that. So if there's a big story coming out of Canada that rises to the level of international headlines, then I'm aware of it. And I do a little bit of a dive into it and I find out about it. But normal day-to-day life, elections, what party is in the majority of the government, what provincial government gets elected in this or that province, and no, I don't pay any attention to that at all. Though, to be honest, it's got nothing to do with being overseas, because even when I was in Canada, I didn't pay any attention to it. There were times in my life, I remember when I was a university student, I felt like I should pay more attention. And then I would get a subscription to our national newspaper, the Globe and Mail. I was basically masquerading as a smarter person than I actually am. And all the smart people I knew in Canada, that's how they grew up. Like every weekend, they get the big national papers, the Toronto Star, huge, like a Toronto paper, the Montreal Gazette, a paper from Vancouver, and then the Globe and Mail, our national newspaper. And then Saturdays and Sundays, they read the whole thing. They're following politics and stories and this and that. And I think, I've got a bit of a brain. I should be more like them. And I would gear up to be more aware of things, and I'd get the Globe and Mail, and then Sunday I sit down with a cup of coffee and I read the whole paper from front to back, and I'm becoming educated. But that would only last like a month, and then I remember again that I don't really care. If I was sitting in Canada in 1989 reading a newspaper, and then the next day you gave me a paper from Canada that was from 1979, I probably wouldn't even notice there was a difference. Like, the headlines are always the same, like even internationally. The names may change, who is at war with who, what election is being contested by these two different parties, but it's always the same story for the most part. And I'm not interested in politics. I'm interested in the behind the scenes. Like, you got all these politicians who get elected to the government, but are they actually doing anything? Like, they're not the ones running the country. They get all the headlines, they have to run for election, they're giving all the speeches, but while they're doing all of that, there's other people, the civil servants, the ones who are actually building the roads and the hospitals and doing all the work. How that works, that I'm interested in. So that's why there's a lot of podcasts that I listen to that give me the behind the scenes stories about the economy and industry. That I'm interested in. But politicians, they're so depressing, especially now in the last 10 years or so. I mean, I don't think anybody has a lot of respect for politicians in general. They don't come across well in the media. So yeah, I don't think many people admire politicians in any country in the world, but the last 10 years, based mainly on what's going on in the United States, I think we're all just sort of like, what a bunch of jokers. I mean, they have no idea what they're doing. They all seem to be kind of lunatics for the most part, whatever political party you're talking about. But behind these lunatics, there are really intelligent, dedicated, good people who are still trying to run the country. The politician might come up with some crazy new policy that they made up last night while they were lying in bed, but then the civil servants have to take that new policy and actually implement it. There are people out there actually building the bridges and implementing the tariff policies, figuring out, okay, now you have to pay this much in a tariff. We have to collect that money. How do we collect it? On what kind of time scale? Where does the money go? And then we have to deliver it here. You know, there are people out there who do the actual work of government. Those people I'm interested in, but the politicians, not so much. So yeah. Current events worldwide, I pay attention to. Like right now, of course, the big story is the attack, the drone attack from Ukraine. That I find fascinating. I've already spent hours looking into this story because it just blows my mind, the way drones have changed the face of warfare. So there are some amazing YouTube videos now talking about exactly the technology involved in this spiderweb attack of Ukraine in Russia. So a big current event like that, especially where technology is involved, those stories I'm interested in, and I'll do a deep dive into those. And but there I've noticed a difference as well. I was so frustrated when the story first broke because all the mainstream media outlets, they were trumpeting how amazing this thing was, how revolutionary it was, and they would say what happened, but they don't give any details. My brain is full of details, where the story, I'm sure you know the story, everybody's following it, that Ukraine put all of these drones into trucks and then drove the trucks into Russia, parked them, and then operated them remotely on a schedule, launched the drones, and then the drones blew up all of these bombers and other very expensive planes in Russia. And it's just an amazing story from a technology point of view and a warfare point of view, and just, wow, what a crazy, crazy thing. But none of the mainstream media ever talked about how it actually happened. And that's the first thing I think about, because you've got these trucks and they're enclosed. How do the drones get out? And the mainstream media will say, well, it was done remotely. And I'm like, well, yeah, but how? and you would see like a diagram of the top of a truck that was open, and you see all of these drones laid out on these platforms. And they say, well, the drones just fly away. Well, yeah, but how did the top of the truck open? Like, how did that actually happen? I'm really big on specific details. So my first thought was, well, a human being must have done it. Like, how else could they do it? Where they've got a truck sitting there, and some human being has to go up there and remove the lid of the crate, take off the lid, and now the drones can fly. But who were these people? How did they do it? Did they all get arrested? But anyway, now if you go onto YouTube, now you're starting to see videos from actual intelligent people who seem to have access to more information, and they dive into the details. And they're actually showing diagrams and giving specifics about exactly how these truck compartments were built and the mechanism that slid the roof open using motors and hydraulics and all these sorts of things. So they actually dive into the details, which I find really interesting. So I guess what I'm saying is even a big international current event may not get my interest right away because the coverage is such surface level. Any news outlet just doesn't really tell you anything. They're all about sensationalism. But if you wait a couple of days, then real people, podcasts who know what they're talking about, the technical people, they start putting out stories. And it's like, oh, that's how they did it. Oh, that's the technology. Okay. Then I get really interested in the story. So, long answer to a simple question. I told myself before I turn on the GoPro that I'm going to keep my answers short and to the point. Obviously, I'm failing at that. So I'm still recovering from this cold. I'm feeling better, but my throat is still a wreck. So I'm having trouble here, but I will soldier on because my next question comes from my friend WanderEats. And this is a very typical WanderEats kind of question. So WanderEats, he asks, if you have to choose living your life for a longer term, perhaps in 5 to 10 years' time, where would it be and why? And I have trouble understanding this question, to be honest. I'm not quite sure what he's asking. Like, is he asking, where do I see myself in 10 years? That question, I have no clue. I have no idea. I don't even know where I'm going to be tomorrow. I really don't. My whole life is in disarray. So where will I be 10 years from now? No clue, honestly. I can't answer that question at all. But he might be asking, like, if, gun to your head, you had to choose somewhere to live, 5 to 10 years from now, or if you had to choose a place to live for 5 years, where would you choose to live? I'm not quite sure that's the question he's asking either, but he does say, choose living your life for a longer term, where would it be? So yeah, that's also a kind of a tough question to answer because I have to qualify everything. Are we talking about a fantasy life where money is not an issue? I might have one answer to that question, but in the real world where money matters, where would I live for 5 years? Then it's a completely different answer. And it is an interesting question, of course, but yeah, maybe my answer would be the same in both questions because let's take the fantasy route where money is not really an object. I mean, I don't want to be Elon Musk. I don't want to be super wealthy, but let's just assume I'm a normal person and I've retired with a nest egg, and therefore, where would I go to live? That to me is a fantasy world, but let's look at it from that point of view. Where would I go? Where would I choose? And it is an interesting question because you would think I would choose a place of comfort and a certain type of pleasure where, wow. But that doesn't really make sense to me because my entire life I've never really been about comfort and pleasure. I don't know what to do with that stuff. So even if I have access to it, I don't even take advantage of it anyway. So for example, this kind of relates to this idea of giving reviews of hotels on Google Maps. Why don't I do that? Well, because it's different for everybody. So a lot of people would hate this hotel room because it has no windows, no furniture, no balcony, nothing. And like, wouldn't it be better if I could spend $50 a night on a hotel room in Malaysia, then I get a big room with a balcony, with furniture, and they have an infinity swimming pool, and a sauna, and a jacuzzi, and an exercise room. But the thing is, if I were staying in that $50 or $100 a night room, I wouldn't use any of those things. I would be sitting on the bed right here, exactly as I am, drinking instant coffee. I wouldn't go swimming in the pool, particularly an infinity pool. I wouldn't go to the sauna. I wouldn't go to the jacuzzi. I wouldn't go to the exercise room. I wouldn't sit on the balcony. There have been times in my life where I've had a room with a balcony and I thought, whoa, balcony, I'm going to sit out there and drink my coffee in the morning. I'm out there for 10 minutes. I come back inside because the sun is too hot, it's too noisy, and there are too many bugs. There's flies, there's mosquitoes, and I get driven inside. I close the windows and that's it. I never go out on the balcony again. I mean, if you're a YouTube vlogger, of course you want to show off the balcony. You go out there with your GoPro and you're like, wow, look at my amazing hotel room, and you show the view from your balcony, and oh, I can sit on this balcony and drink my coffee. Oh, and everybody is so jealous of your YouTube life. I could shoot that if I wanted to, but then I would just close the curtains and I'd never go back out there again. I'd go look at the infinity pool, but if it's full of people and there's kids running around, I'm not going up there. Jacuzzi, sauna, same thing. I wouldn't actually use any of those things. If my room had a beautiful desk with a chair, I would be sitting on the bed just like this. I would never sit in the chair or use the desk. If it's a big, like a suite with multiple rooms, I would never go into any of the other rooms. I would just stay in the bedroom, sitting on the bed just like this. So I have some basic comforts I like. I like an air conditioner, that's pretty sweet. I can live without it if there's a good fan, and I like having a private bathroom. Hot water is nice, but I don't even need that. So I don't know, I just never, going way back in my life, even growing up as a kid, my family didn't have any money, so we never actually thought in terms of doing anything. You know, it seems weird now when I think back to my childhood, and it just became a habit. So it feels like even if I had $1 million in the bank, it would never occur to me to do all the things that millionaires do, because it's just not an ingrained habit. So for example, getting back to fantasy, if money was not an option, it's like, well, okay, I could live in Canada in a nice place. I've got a nice condo or a nice house, and I have enough money to fly anywhere I want. Wow, that would be the perfect life. That's what I would do. I live in Canada, got a nice place. When the weekend comes up, I could say, oh, you know, I'm assuming I've got friends and wife or girlfriend living with me, and I say, hey, why don't we go to Denver this weekend and go skiing? Why don't we go to Banff this weekend and go skiing? That's a normal life, but it would never occur to me to do that. It's just not an ingrained habit. So that fantasy life of luxury and comfort would be kind of wasted on me because I just don't have the habits of doing any of those things. So now if we talk about a realistic life where money is an issue, then I can't do any of that. I can't live in Canada. I can't live in Denver. I can't live in a vineyard in Spain or in Paris or New York, take advantage of all the things these big cities have to offer. I can't do any of that. So then I'm limited to basically the places I live now. Sumatra, Vietnam, places that you can live on a low budget. When I was in Thailand, I was paying $100 a month for rent. That was all during the pandemic, so $100 a month was my rent, and I could afford that at that time. So that was kind of the places I would live. And so it seems like if I could choose anywhere to live, I would go to the same places. So I would probably end up picking the same places because I like those places. So if you asked me, okay, you could live anywhere you want, where would you like to live? I mean, boring or weird as it might seem, I'd go back to Tanjung, Balai. I like it there. But the one place around the world that keeps trickling around in my head is always Africa. So maybe I would pick Africa as a place to live for 5 years long term. Because Africa is still a little bit out of my comfort zone. Feels like going to Africa would be a big adventure, new, exciting, difficult, challenging. So I think that is my answer. Fantasy world and realistic world, where would I choose to live? I would choose somewhere in Africa, and ideally multiple places. Fly into Uganda, live in Kampala for a year, travel around, like do day trips from Kampala or weekend trips into the countryside, but have a base in Kampala, then move to Sulawesi, then move to Benin or Togo. I could easily do 5 to 10 years just spending a year in 5 different African countries. I think that would be my choice right now. 2 more questions from Gilles. I'll deal with them one at a time. Hi, Doug. Did you meet people who live abroad far away from her citizen country like you? Short answer, no, not anymore. I just don't meet other foreigners for the most part. I mean, I meet a scattering. The people I do meet tend to be YouTubers. Like, I've gotten to know Expat Pete here in Kuala Lumpur, and Expat Pete is a YouTuber. He's from Australia, but he lives in Malaysia now with his wife, so this is his current home. So he is a man I've gotten to know who lives far away from his home country, but he's kind of the exception because I got to know him because we share a YouTube kind of life. But normally, day to day, I don't meet anybody. Like, I don't meet other foreigners anymore. Back in the old days, in the backpacking days, then I met a lot of people, but they were backpackers like me, and the world was very different back then, where it just happened. You didn't even have to work at it. Where as a backpacker, you've got your Lonely Planet guidebook, you got your backpack, you come out of the bus station and you use your guidebook to find the cheapest hotel, the backpacker hotel, and you go there and there's 20 other backpackers, same age group as you, more or less, from all around the world, and you just naturally start talking to all of them and you interact and you travel with other people for a couple of days, and you're in the lobby of that hotel and the guy sitting beside you, you start chatting with him. Oh, here's a guy from Sweden. And he's like, oh, you're going to the same place I'm going to. Hey, you want to go get lunch together? And you just start making these connections, and you meet a woman there who knows this guy, and now there's 3 of you traveling together, and you pick up somebody else at the next hotel, and then you all split up, and you run into those same people in the Philippines 2 months later. It's like, hey, yeah, we met in Vietnam, and now we're meeting in the Philippines. And it was just a social world of backpackers. And I met these people and hung out with them all the time. But ever since I started cycling more And ever since I got older, and ever since the world of the internet and smartphones and Grab and Agoda.com and all these things emerged, and Google Maps, no, I don't meet anybody anymore. I don't, and part of it, of course, is I don't live in the same circles. Like, I'm sure here in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, must be a huge expat community. People like me, men in their late 50s and 60s, who are still working here, professionals, or they've retired here, but we don't move in the same circles, so I never meet them. I'm sure there's expat communities of all kinds, but we don't have anything in common. We live in different worlds. We don't go to the same places, and I just don't meet them. And then you have tourists, and I see them from time to time out in Chinatown here. You see tour groups. You see them on the hop-on, hop-off tour buses. If I go to a place like KL Tower, yeah, there's other foreign tourists there, but I have no reason ever to interact with any of them either. They're always in groups or couples. You don't meet individual backpackers anymore. And then because of Agoda and Booking.com, we're all separated. We don't stay at the same hotels anymore. I stay here at the J Hotel Masjid, India. I never see another foreigner here. Yeah, so basically no. I just don't meet other foreigners anymore, unless it's a special circumstance of some kind. But it's pretty rare to meet other foreigners like me. Gilles' other question, I noticed this one, a personal one. He writes, "Hi Doug, maybe it is intrusive. Did you fall in love since you left Canada?" So I suppose if I were a wise person, I would just sort of ignore that question. And yeah, it's a personal question. I'll put that to the side and pretend I never saw it. But I don't know. There's nothing particularly sensitive about my life. I'm kind of an open book for the most part. But yeah, falling in love, I'm very bad at it. Well, no, I'm very good at it. I think it may seem surprising, but I'm somewhat of a romantic at heart. I think I have a strong romantic vibe, which I don't act on, but it's there. The problem is I'm not very good at being in love and living that life. I think there's a tension in my life. I've figured this out now that I'm in my 60s. You know, you look back and you're like, aha, that's why you had so much trouble in love, that there's a conflict in my life between the drive to love. Like you can't avoid it. I mean, no matter how many walls you put up, how hard you try not to, life catches up on you, and before you know it, you're falling in love. You can't help it. It even happens to cold-hearted individuals like me. But then you've got that urge for love, but then I also have an equal urge to sort of be by myself and be independent, and those are in conflict. And I also have difficulty making decisions and committing to something long term. And obviously, love pushes you. You cannot be in love and just make up life day to day. It doesn't work. Love puts you on a path to settling down and making commitments, even short-term ones, but making choices that, okay, this is what my life is about. And this, your life can be about being a wanderer, but I don't even commit to that. It's like I always keep all my options open because I just don't know what I'm going to want to do. And that just does not work in a relationship. So I'm not constantly falling in and out of love, but in terms of my life, since I became sort of a permanent overseas person, it started in 1991, I guess. I mean, I went overseas before 91, but traveling for a while, back to Canada, traveling for a while, back to Canada. So I did that before the 90s. But in 1991, I figured that out from looking at my journals. that's when I flew from Toronto to South Korea. And from that date, my life has been based overseas for the most part. And I'm no longer based or living in Canada. So from 1991 to 2025, that's the period of time Gilles is asking about. So from 91 to 2025, have you ever fallen in love? And I would say once. Where, as I said, knowing I'm not very good at it and being something of an independent person, it's not easy for it to happen to me. And I keep the walls up, but even I, what's the word I'm looking for? It even happens to me. So I fell in love once. And long story. You can just sort of fill in the blanks of that story, the struggle between being in love and this urge to sort of live an independent life. So whatever happened, it did not work out in the end. So here I am, on my own again. So did I fall in love? Yeah, one time. And it was with a Canadian, by the way, a Canadian woman. And people are curious that, okay, you're spending all this time in Asia, or I've made trips to Africa and South America. And a certain type of man that I meet will kind of do a nudge, nudge, wink, wink thing. It actually happened to me when I was out the other day here in Kuala Lumpur. I just met a Malaysian man. Never met him before, but we just started chatting and said, "Oh, who are you?" And, "Oh, you're from Canada." And he found out that I do a lot of traveling. And of course, he wanted to talk about women. Like, I know why you're traveling. The beautiful women of Vietnam and of Thailand and of Malaysia. And I'm like, well, yeah, the women in these countries are astonishingly beautiful. And you're at risk of falling in love 10 times a day. But no, that is not the driving force of my life. And in fact, the one time, love snuck up on me was with Canadian woman. I find the language barrier and the cultural barrier and the barrier of experiences between women from another country, it's a pretty great barrier to overcome. So I was never really at risk of, a lot of men that spend time overseas, you see them, they've married a woman from the Philippines or from Vietnam or from Thailand, and then they buy a house together and now they live in the Philippines or Malaysia. But I was never at risk of that happening to me. But I was at risk apparently of falling in love with a woman from my own country, and so that happened. But one time. A question from Khairul Niza, and another, I suppose, somewhat personal question, but I have no problem with those. Hey Doug, you visited so many places of worship from all kinds of religions: Thailand, India, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, etc. After all that, what's your personal view on religion? Do you follow or lean toward any particular faith? And I'm curious, growing up, did your family raise you with any spiritual or religious beliefs, or was it more of a figure it out yourself kid situation? I guess a typical sort of question in that there's a very easy, simple answer and a long, complicated one. The simple answer is no, I'm not a religious person. So when I'm visiting Buddhist temples or mosques or Hindu temples or any of these beautiful places, I'm not doing it from a perspective of spirituality. I think I'm a very philosophical person, pretty thoughtful person. I love thinking about things, the meaning of things, how things work, but I'm not a spiritual person in any way. So if I'm going to a Buddhist temple, it's because of what it represents in terms of its art, culture, history, its place in that country, but I'm not going there to study Buddhism because I'm looking for something to fill a hole in my life. So I'm not looking at it as a religious thing. Same thing with a Hindu temple, with a mosque. I visit all these places, but it's not for spiritual reasons. So no, I'm not a religious or a spiritual person at all. I did grow up in a religious family. My family back in Canada was Christian, and it was the Dutch Christian Reformed Church, because my hometown had a large Dutch immigrant community. Like after World War II, large numbers of Europeans left Europe because their countries were in shambles and they were looking for a new life. And then a lot of people from the Netherlands immigrated to Canada, and hundreds of Dutch families settled down in my hometown. And they were all Christian. They were all members of the same Dutch Christian Reformed Church, and they formed churches in my hometown. I remember there were 3 of them in particular, and we actually had them numbered, like the first Christian Reformed Church, the second, and the third in this area where I was living. And it was a pretty intense form of Christianity, I guess, quite traditional and conservative, quite literal in its interpretation of the Bible, things like that. And it was pretty hardcore, where you went to church not just once, but twice Sunday. You would go to church Sunday morning, and you go to church Sunday night. So 2 times a week you go to church, twice on Sunday, basically. And my family attended this church my entire childhood, and as a child in that family, off I went to church every Sunday. And the difference, or a special thing about this situation, was that it was not just a Christian religion, it was a Dutch community. So in fact, my entire social life was based out of the church as well. So like you might think in Canada, you go to the Boy Scouts, right? The Boy Scouts of Canada or something. But no, I attended the Dutch Christian Reformed Church version of Boy Scouts, which was called the Cadets. It was very, very similar to Boy Scouts, all the same compass work and learning how to go camping and tie knots and start a fire. But there was also Bible study. So, and when I was young, I went to a private Christian elementary school where all the children of the Dutch families, they all put their money together to pay the teachers and pay for the school, and we all went to the Dutch Christian private school. So from not kindergarten, but from grade 1 to 8, I went to a private Christian school. So there were classes in science and math and history, language, but also Bible study and things like that. It had Christian components. So I grew up in that world, but perhaps luckily for me, there seemed to be a quality of the Dutch Christian Reformed Church that was very stoic and very private. They were not very open about feelings or emotions. People kind of left you alone. So it was possible for someone like me to live in my own world, even though I grew up in a Christian family and my mother and father would pray before and after every meal, and we had Bible study at the end of every meal, and I went to church twice a week. I went to a private Christian school for 8 years of my life. I went to the Christian Cadets, as that was my social club. So I even played hockey for the Christian Hockey League. So even though my entire world was immersed in Christianity, none of it penetrated, because nobody ever approached you personally or directly. You could go to church, which I did twice a week for most of my life, but I was lost in a world of my own thoughts. So, I did a lot of reading. I loved novels, I loved stories. So I would go to church, and then I would go with my family. I got my little suit and my little tie on and all dressed up for church. And I sit in the pew, and I'm there for an hour and a half, the hymn singing, the sermons, the collection. But the whole time, I had no idea what was going on because I was just lost in my own thoughts. a young boy's thoughts, imagining all these situations where I was a hero, saving the world and saving the girl I loved and being a hero. And I just had all these fantasies going around in my head all the time while I was sitting in church. And it didn't matter. So I kind of looked forward to going to church because it was like the freedom to just get lost in your own thoughts. And then all your friends were there. And after church, there was a fellowship hall. And the women of the church, there was like this fellowship society. Every Sunday they would make coffee and cookies. And so after church, you all run down to the fellowship hall. And I got to have a cup of coffee, even when not as a young boy, but becoming a teenager, I was allowed to have the coffee and hang out with your friends and chat with all the adults and listen in on their conversations. So it was a wonderful social world, but the actual religious side of it just went right over my head. I just wasn't really paying any attention. So I was allowed to have my own thoughts, and I was much more of a scientist than a religious person. So I define the world and the universe in terms of science more than religion. However, there is a certain perspective for me where if you take, like you could take religion, philosophy, and science, and you take science to its furthest extent, like you go as far into scientific thought as you can, you start ending up in worlds of physics that start to sound very religious in tone. You see what I mean? It's like, for me, religion and science and philosophy and emotions are not, they don't conflict, because if you start at the base of religion and start following religious thought, and you start with science and start following scientific thought, by the time you get to the extremes, it's almost like you're saying the same thing, but using a different vocabulary, if you see what I mean. So, yeah, I have no issues with religion. And there was a period of time when I was going to like late high school and into university where it was all the rage to equate Eastern mysticism, like Eastern philosophy, with physics, the extreme versions of physics. And you had all these books that were written that were talking about Buddhism and drawing parallels between Buddhism and physics and science and things like that. There was that period as well. And then Christianity and Islam and Buddhism and Hinduism are all mixed together. And there are all these books written from that perspective. And I read them all. I devoured those books. I thought they were all quite interesting. So, yeah, I guess that's more or less my perspective on religion, except for the other side of it, that for me, the true value in religions is more to do with community and community support. And I grew up in that world where these people formed a community, and if someone in that community developed cancer and lost their job and couldn't make an income, they had thousands of people supporting them. So, the religion can build a world, a social world for you of friends and family and financial support and emotional support. And I see a great deal of value in that. And I see that in mosques, and I see that in Buddhist temples as well. So, yeah. Long answer to a short question again. One thing about running the GoPro without a battery and plugged into USB-C power, you have to be careful that you've actually hit the record button when you want to record, because several times I've almost not done it. And the weird thing is, when you don't have a battery in the GoPro, you get a big red like battery symbol on the top with an X through it. And if you're not paying attention, that red square looks like the recording indicator. So several times I look up at the GoPros, oh yeah, it's recording. And then I start talking, and then I realize, oh no, that's not the record symbol. That's actually no battery symbol, but it's also red and looks exactly like the I'm recording light. So anyway, Yeah, I've done it in the past where I've spoken for like 20 minutes and then I checked the GoPro and I realized, oh, it's not recording. So you got to be careful. So next question from Robert Merrig. You have been showing several hiking videos in KL, and since you are an avid cyclist, you obviously love the outdoors. Have you ever gone trekking in Nepal? It seems like something you would enjoy. Well, luckily I can talk about this question because yeah, I did go trekking in Nepal, but yeah, unfortunately only once. But fortunately, it was one of the big experiences of my life. I could probably list, 10 things in my life that were the formative experiences of my entire life, and trekking in Nepal was one of them. And that took place way back in the 90s. Really glad that I went to Nepal in the 90s because I've watched some YouTube videos recently about trekking in Nepal and about just traveling in Nepal in general. And as with most countries, it just seems like an entirely different place. It has changed so dramatically. So I'm very glad that I had the 90s experience. It's kind of weird though, when I was living in the 90s, it doesn't seem like any kind of ancient period of time. Like the 90s to me feels like a modern era. But now that it's 2025, every time I talk about the 90s, it's like I'm referring to something from 400 years ago, like way in the past, like back in the 90s. It feels so weird to think of it that way. But yeah, 91, when I left Canada, that was, like almost 40 years ago, like 35 years ago. It's pretty crazy. So yeah, I went to Nepal and I intended to go trekking. I went there with a backpack and I was traveling around Asia. I had gone to South Korea and then I was teaching in South Korea for a while and I saved up a few $1,000s. I can't remember how much it was. Not very much money, but at that time I thought it was a lot of money. And then I quit my job in South Korea. And then with my little nest egg, I decided to go backpacking around Asia. And that was my first backpacking experience. The first time I was really a backpacker and meeting other backpackers and following sort of the banana pancake trail. And I found myself at one point on a plane flying into Kathmandu. And it was a very different experience back in those days compared to today. But partially also because of what I talked about before, how in those days you naturally met people and formed up with them to become travel partners. It just happened all the time. Never happens anymore. But I was on the plane flying into Kathmandu, and there happened to be a young Australian guy sitting beside me on the plane. We started talking, and he was going to go do the Annapurna circuit, or at least he was going to go to Pokhara and then do part of the Annapurna circuit trek. And that's where I wanted to go as well. So we started chatting and say, hey, do you want to go together? And then we ended up staying at the same hotel in Kathmandu because, we found the same transportation into the city from the airport, went to the same hotel. And then in the hotel, he was talking with some other people and he met these two women from Australia. They also wanted to go trekking in the Pokhara area. So we were talking with them and said, hey, why don't we go together? So then we were a foursome. And then we met two other guys from Australia. So I was like one Canadian with 5 Australians. And we all went to Pokhara by truck. And again, this was a whole different era. I think we started off by bus out of Kathmandu, but it was one of those old rickety buses. You could climb onto the roof and sit on the roof and look at the world going by. Nobody was worried about the safety of doing that in those days. Big, long, difficult journey, and then you're climbing in the back of trucks, and then you're taking the truck to get around. So then we did the hike, and I didn't really know much about the experience of doing it. This was all brand new to me. I was figuring things out as I went. And turns out that I did everything backwards. And it turns out that if you're going to do the Annapurna circuit, it's like a circle, obviously, starting in Pokhara, and then it takes about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, depending on how long you go, and you do this circle around the Annapurna mountain range and then back to Pokhara. And if you're going to do the Annapurna circuit, wisdom is you do it in a counterclockwise direction. And that's because partway through the trek, you have to go over a very high pass. I think it's called Thorung La. I think La means pass in Nepalese. And it's very, very high, and it can be quite dangerous even for trekking. I mean, you're not climbing mountains, you're not roping in and using ice axes, you're not going up to the peak of Everest. But even when you're trekking, if you go over a high pass, it can get up into a pretty dangerous area, I guess. And if you go clockwise, getting from the starting point to the top of Thorung La and back down again is very difficult to do. But it's easier if you go in the counterclockwise direction. So everybody was saying, oh, if you're going to do the circuit, you got to go counterclockwise, you got to go counterclockwise. So of course, I ended up doing it clockwise, because if you go clockwise, the first part of the trek is the Jomsom trek. And that, I think, is like one of the most popular treks in Nepal. Goes through some very beautiful areas and is more developed in terms of places to stay. It's like the easiest trek to do, but also taking you to some of the most beautiful areas. And it's like 8 days long. So all the Australians I was with, that's all they wanted to do. They wanted to do the Jomsom trek, takes about 8 days, and then they're going to stop there and go back. But I wanted to continue from there and do the full Annapurna circuit. So that's how I ended up doing it in the wrong direction. I'm having another cup of coffee, obviously. But yeah, thinking back, it probably wasn't very wise. It feels like now in the YouTube era that my experience of going up and over the Thorung La, the pass, by myself in the winter, because this was winter time, and there's a lot of debate about when's the best time to go trekking in Nepal. Obviously, you want to go there when it's not so cold, so winter is not the best time to go, but on the upside, wintertime, the trails are less busy, and the skies are really clear, so you get the most beautiful views. If you go in the warm season, there might be more rain, more mud on the trails, and it's much, much more crowded, and the views aren't as nice. But anyway, I happen to be there in the wintertime. And then if you go up and over Thorung La, and if at the top you get hit with a snowstorm, yeah, you're in trouble. You could be in big trouble. You could be stuck up there. The trail gets covered in 3 feet of snow, and the trail is covered up, so you can't even see the trail anymore. So where do you go? But of course, back in those days and not really thinking it through, I was like, I'll go. You know, like the danger of it never even occurred to me. And who knows, maybe it really wasn't that dangerous at all. But it feels like what I did could be, as I said, you could see the video on YouTube now. Dumb Canadian dies on the Annapurna circuit, and there'll be this video about how I set off at 3:30 in the morning all by myself with no companions, no safety gear, no idea where I was going, no way to contact anyone, and how this dumb Canadian made it to the top, and then a storm moved in and he was stranded, and then he died. You know, it could easily have been that story. But I remember climbing and climbing. I mean, it was a long, long, long climb to get to the pass. And the wind up near the top was overwhelming. It was like a cyclone out there. The wind was so powerful. And there were these rocks there, and I would have to hide behind the rocks, crouch down just to get out of the wind for a while. And I would poke my head out from behind the rock and just like, and then finally you get your energy together, and I emerged from behind the rock with that wind and going up and up and up. And there were sections that were covered in ice, like large flat areas of ice. And then I'd be at one rock, and in order to get to the next rock, I would have to sort of like do a run and then slide across the ice, hoping I make it to that rock so I can grab hold of it, so I don't just follow the ice and just like slide off the cliff to my death kind of thing. That's my memory of what the hike was like, doing the Thorung La Pass by myself in the winter. Yeah, so it's probably kind of a miracle that I made it to the over the pass and then down the other side. And then on the other side, there was nobody and nothing. Like, I didn't see another person the entire day. There were no other trekkers doing the Annapurna circuit. On the Johnson side, there were a few people, again, not very many. And then once I left my group and went off on my own to complete the circuit, there was nobody. And then on the other side, it's much more remote. On the Johnson side, there were tea houses. And again, they're very different from how it is today. I remember the tea houses being essentially normal Nepalese village houses. So Nepalese villagers had taken their house and said, okay, now it's a tea house and backpackers can stay here. And you're basically just lying on the floor in your sleeping bag and all of your down mountaineering gear that you rented in Kathmandu. I rented some of the ugliest down mountaineering gear. If I remember right, I had like lime green down pants and a bright orange down puffy jacket that I rented or bought. I think I rented in Kathmandu, because they had all these stores in Kathmandu where like professional hiking crews from around the world who went up Everest or wherever, rather than bringing all their gear home because it's too heavy to bring with them, they would just dump it in Kathmandu or sell it. And then these stores started up where you could rent professional mountaineering gear. And then you could use it on your trek, for a month and then bring it back to them later on. And I'm pretty sure that's what I did. Anyway, I had the ugliest clothing imaginable, but those down hiking pants saved my life because it was so cold there. And in the villages, staying in these houses, we're not talking about hotels, they were like homes. And the way they lived, they actually dug a hole in the room of the house. Like if there was a front room, they would dig a hole down into the ground and then put kind of like a slab of wood on top. And then they build a fire down there and put hot coals down there. And then everybody would sit on the floor with their legs down into the hole, and then they have blankets over the table, and then you pull the blanket up over your shoulder. And that's where you would sit at night, myself and the 5 Australians that I was trekking with. We were freezing to death. And then we would climb into these holes where they had the fire going down there, and then we pull the blankets over our shoulders, and that's how we would stay warm at night. It was that kind of life back then. And I watch videos now of people trekking, even on the Johnson trek, and they're staying in really nice hotels. Like, we're still talking about the mountains of Nepal, so it's not the Ramadan Inn or the Hilton 5-star accommodation, but they're nice hotels with private rooms and bathrooms and things like that. And none of that, in my experience, existed back in the early 90s when I was there. But yeah, when I made it over Thorung La and down on the other side, even the very rustic tea houses that we were staying in on the Johnson side, they disappeared. And I was arriving in these villages that were empty because there were no trekkers in the wintertime. So all the villagers, they just go to Kathmandu for the winter. They leave their villages and they're completely abandoned, and then they go to Kathmandu for the winter, find other work, and then when the nice weather returns, they come back, and then they open up their homes as tea houses. But when I was there, the villages were just empty. And I thought all I had to do was get up and over the pass down to the other side, and then there's going to be a village where I can buy drinking water and where I can get food. I mean, you're not getting real food on this trek at that time. All you got was dal, lentils, basically. That's what the Nepalese would eat, and that's what we would eat as trekkers. So, yeah, I thought I would just arrive in these villages, and even though I'm running out of water, I can, get water again, and I can buy dal. And when I got to these villages, they were just empty. There was nowhere to get water, nowhere to get food, nowhere to sleep at night, and I just had to keep walking and walking and walking. And at this point, it was so long ago, I can't remember where I ended up. Obviously, I ended up somewhere, and I eventually found water and food, but it was a bit of a challenge. But that stands out in my mind as one of the pivotal experiences of my life, my time in Nepal, and in particular doing the Annapurna circuit. So ever since then, I kept telling myself that I would love to go back. If I look back over my life and I start listing regrets, all the things I wish I had done, I do put on my list, I really should have gone back to Nepal a second, third, fourth time. But I don't know if those regrets actually make sense, because I do find I have a personality where I'm okay doing something once. So I had the experience of trekking in Nepal, and I enjoyed it, and it was amazing, and it's a great memory. But somehow I don't really need to do it again. Like, I don't have to go back to Nepal and do every trek in the country. And I find that's been true with everything in my life. I've been scuba diving, and yet I never made scuba diving a part of my life. It's not like every year I plan a scuba diving holiday. For one thing, I could never afford it, but at the same time, I feel like, well, I've had the experience of scuba diving. I don't have to every year go to a new reef and do it over and over again. Same thing with snowboarding. I had 2 seasons of snowboarding in Canada when I worked at the ski resort. So every winter, it never occurs to me to plan a ski trip. Like, I've gone skiing as well. Like, I've gone skiing, I've gone snowboarding. I've had that experience in my life. I don't need to do it every year. And that kind of ties back into my answer to Daryl's question from WanderEats about, where would I choose to live? You might think, if I could choose anywhere, well, I'll live in Vancouver or Denver, and then every winter I can go skiing. But even if I were there, I probably wouldn't, because I've done it once or twice. Or snowboarding, I did it every single day for 2 years, like 2 winters, because I was living on the ski resort. So I'm like, well, I'm cool. I don't really need to go skiing every winter, scuba diving every summer. I'd like to have these experiences once, and then I don't really need to revisit them. I would rather do something new, or go somewhere new. So anyway, this idea that I really wish I had gone back to Nepal and done more treks because I enjoyed it so much, I don't really believe that is a true regret, because I'm pretty happy with my experience of my Annapurna circuit trek. It's a pretty amazing experience of my life. Robert Merrig asks a second question. I kind of forgot about this one. I don't know I have an answer prepared or not. He writes, also, what is the most off the beaten path place you have been that you really enjoyed? Not necessarily want to go back, but you are glad you did it. I may not come up with a good answer because I haven't thought this one through, but off the beaten path place that I enjoyed. And the first thing that jumps out at me, I don't know if an entire country qualifies as off the beaten path, but again, Ethiopia back in the 90s. I think in any sense of the word, you can think of Ethiopia as off the beaten path. It doesn't have a huge tourism industry. We're not talking about, Paris or anything like that, or Nepal even. Malaysia has a huge tourism industry. So compared to real tourism countries, Ethiopia is not going to see a lot of tourists or even backpackers. So it's going to be off the beaten path. But he did say in his question that you enjoyed, that you really enjoyed. And Ethiopia is a tough place to quantify, to put a label on, because when I went there, in terms of enjoyment, like pleasure, almost nothing in Ethiopia falls into that category. The way I went there, how I did it, the dumb things I did. I mean, I was there cycling, and then when I gave up on the cycling, I tried to go hiking through the mountains, and I had no idea what I was doing. Like when I went to Ethiopia, I don't know, I'm a dummy. I over-plan things, and I'm not very intelligent when I do my planning. So I think and I think and I think, and my idea for going to Ethiopia was to be able to do everything. This gets back to my personality flaw, where I have difficulty committing to one thing. So I wanted to go there on a cycling trip, but rather than committing to just cycling, I also wanted the ability to go hiking if the opportunity arose, or even like just normal backpacking, traveling by buses and by trains. So then I thought, okay, I want to go there by bike, but I want the option to be able to leave my bicycle in the hotel, put on a backpack, and then go that way. But I'm such a dummy, it never occurred to me that if I wanted to do that, I mean, I could just buy a cheap backpack locally, right? But the way I did it was I put together a cycling touring rig, but then I wanted to bring a backpack. And because I'm a moron, I bought one of the biggest, most technical, hardcore mountaineering, like North Face backpacks money can buy, which ended up being quite a heavy backpack, quite big and bulky. So then I bought a trailer for my bicycle just so I had a place to put my backpack, right? So the whole idea was I took this backpack, filled it up with all of my stuff, and then I put the backpack inside the trailer, and I hooked the trailer to the back of the bike, and I had pannier bags for my other stuff. So I had a lot of gear with me, and it was all kind of unnecessary as it turned out. Because as I said, the easier option would have been to just go there by bike with pannier bags, and then you can buy a cheap bag. But I guess my problem is I really enjoy technology, and the thought of just going to the market and buying a cheap bag for $5 would really bother me, because I know after 3 days all the straps are going to rip off, the zippers are going to break. I mean, it's going to be a piece of junk, poorly designed. It's going to fall apart. And then, when I decided to bring a backpack, so I went shopping for a good backpack, and then I bought one that was too good for my needs. But anyway, that's just one example of how I made my trip to Ethiopia more difficult than it needed to be. So a lot of the fault lay with me. And then, of course, cycling is hard. And then Ethiopia itself made the journey extremely difficult. Back in the 90s, extremely tough place to travel. The circumstances when I was there, the events in the country at the time, the road condition, the way the people behaved, the kids throwing rocks at me all day, every day, screaming at me all day, every day. So from a pure comfort and pleasure point of view, nothing in Ethiopia was enjoyable. It was hard and difficult from the beginning all the way to the end. And I was there for nearly a year. I was there for a long time, doing a lot of different things. And I got so sick when I was there. It was a tough time. It didn't have to be so tough. I could have done it easier, smarter. I just wasn't smart enough to do it that way. But the thing is, it was an amazing experience. Like my trek in Nepal, my time in Ethiopia, of course, is one of the formative experiences of my life. So Ethiopia is off the beaten path, an amazing place to visit, enjoyable, but more from a exciting, interesting, adventurous point of view rather than from a pleasure point of view. So my answer to that question would be Ethiopia, and pretty much anywhere in Ethiopia. And every single place that I can think of where I went to when I was in Ethiopia. I think back through my memories, my reaction to it was like, whoa, wow, what a place that was. It was like, oh yeah, I went there. Wow, what a place that was. So many things in Ethiopia were extraordinary. Yeah, so Ethiopia. And a final question from UmmaGumma. This is sort of a topic that he's brought up a lot in the past with me, and then with other YouTubers and things like that. Basically, making money. And his question is, how do you make a living now? Do you do any side work like freelance, independent work? I don't see much income potential from your YouTube channel or Patreon. You have like a trust fund? I know you live budget, but there has to be unexpected expenses, etc. So yeah, pretty simple question, pretty simple answer, to be honest. Savings. That's what I've done my entire life. I'll work for a certain amount of time, and then when I judge, well, not really that. It's when I can't take it anymore. Whatever job I'm doing, I just cannot do it one day longer. Then I give notice and I quit that job. And whatever money I've managed to scrabble together, I go off somewhere and I do something, go traveling, go live somewhere, hang out somewhere until that money runs out. And then when I have absolutely no other choice, utter poverty forces me back. That historically is what I have done. Then I go back somewhere and look for a new job. And it's been a bit of a struggle. I've pushed it too far most of the time in my life. I have stories I could tell about that. And then this recent trip, if you want to call it a trip, all came after when I was working in Taiwan. And when I was in Taiwan, I had a real job with a real company and a work visa and a monthly salary, and my lifestyle was very, very modest. So almost all of my income went straight into the bank for year after year after year. I wasn't making a lot of money compared to an income in Canada. I was living at poverty level or below, but within the context of my lifestyle there, I was able to bank $1,000 a month kind of thing. So every year I put $12,000 away. And then after a few years, it was like, yeah, I couldn't do the job anymore. Yeah, I wasn't very good about doing that job either. I made it more difficult than it needed to be. And I was a wreck by the time I got to the end, with other circumstances feeding into it. So anyway, I gave notice and quit that job and started traveling, and I had some money in the bank, and I've been living on that money I saved from Taiwan ever since then. So ever since I started the YouTube channel, everything I've done, every expense I've had, every piece of gear that I bought, every hotel room I've paid for, everything I've done for my entire YouTube life, I've just paid for it myself out of my savings. So that's basically, I haven't started doing any freelance work. I haven't done anything like that. So I have to do that soon. I think I'm past time when I should give up on this lifestyle, and I have to go look around the world and find paying work once again. So yeah, short answer, savings from old jobs, and with the idea of when that money runs out, I'm going to have to find a new job. All right, that is it for Ask Me Anything for May 2025. And of course, I talked a lot longer than I planned. Probably I talked a lot longer than anyone wanted me to. I started off, as I said, with this idea. I was just going to give very short answers to each question. But once I started talking, I thought, what's the harm? I'll expand on my answers and talk a little bit about each one and give some background information. And if people don't want to listen to me go on for that long, there's always that magical fast forward button. You can jump to the next question using the chapters and the time codes. So that's it. Thank you to everybody on Patreon who submitted a question for me to answer. I really appreciate it. I enjoy the interest in me as a person and the interest in my YouTube channel and what I'm doing. So yeah, thank you very much for showing that interest and submitting those questions, and I hope my answers were interesting. So with that, shutting down, and as always, I'll see you on Patreon, I'll see you on YouTube, Planet Doug Behind the Scenes. I've made a promise here to make more podcast videos on a regular basis, so look out for that. And yeah, that's it. Shutting down for now. See you next time.